Thank you very much. Thanks, Linda, for having me here. This heading to this is intentional, transformational change. I'm standing here as a regulator, the person that you all hate when we walk into your premises. But I want to give you a background why an environmental health practitioner, change from a health inspector to environmental health practitioner, has to do what he or she has to do when he or she arrives at your premises. Because I think that is very important for you to understand before you start making the kind of assumptions. Even the minister dared on TV to blame listeriosis on environmental health practitioners. And I challenged him. And you would have seen in the parliamentary debate, they quoted me in one of the sections of saying the minister is wrong. This is all our responsibility. It's not individuals. And that's why I'm talking about transformational change. And I think what is important for you all to understand, if you don't know this cadre of worker and what he or she is doing, then it's a problem. Because this entire industry is regulated very, very stringently. That's why I like your presentation. It is so rigid that there is no place to maneuver for this regulator when he or she enters your premises. Your R638, that all of you are very happy it came about. I'm now subpoenaed to court to give evidence where a very wise advocate is challenging the regulation. Because an EHP must now train and make sure people are trained in the industry, otherwise they can't be involved in the industry. Read that carefully, because this is now being challenged by this advocate, calling for us to say whether we agree or don't agree on this. But I have to speak the truth. I don't agree with the regulation. And you'll know why. Just to say what environmental health is, and this covers the whole world. It is seen as a subset of a bigger basket of environmental services. It comprises those aspects of human health, including the quality of life, that are determined by physical, chemical, biological, social, and psychosocial factors in the environment. It refers to the theory of practicing, of assessing, correcting, controlling, minimizing, and preventing. It's a mouthful of things that this environmental practitioner is trained to do. Can one individual do all of this? And that's a question you need to ask me. This is the work that he or she does. Food is right at the top, there. Water, land, building, air. And these are the factors. It's a working, home, and recreation environment. So besides your food industry, this individual is called to do all of this in the day-to-day activities that he or she does in an environment in local government. That's his or her responsibility. And this is the legislation that he or she has to enforce. And this is only part of it. It's one of the most highly regulated professions in the world. Remember, I stand here not only as the president of the South African Institute of Environmental Health, I'm also the international president of environmental health. We got 56,000 members in 46 countries. And this is how we do our work. Only on legislation. We come here and enforce all of this legislation. And there's a whole string of it. Sometime when you walk into a restaurant and you say, don't smoke in these premises, and you want to be almost killed in that place, you'll understand why. But we have to do it. That's our job. And this is what they do in terms of their work. This is in terms of a regulation signed off by the minister, and this is what that EHP is expected to do when he or she enters your premises. These are the legal mandates. All of this, it's in the Constitution, clearly spelled out in Schedule 4. The Municipal Structures Act, that's where local government, that is municipal health services, the list I gave you before, and the Health Act in 632(1) says that municipalities must enforce those legislation. The government notice 826 dated 13th that metros and district municipalities must implement MHS, which is environmental health. And then the Health Professionals Act. Even to practice, this individual has to be registered with the Health Professional Council of South Africa. Because if he or she does not register, she cannot practice. In fact, you can tell them, and take them up legally and say, we are not prepared to listen to this individual, and that's what most of the court cases are fought about. And we are called on as experts to give evidence in these cases. And then the regulation in terms of if you practice, you can be fined, and the employer employing you. So it's a highly regulated thing. And then in terms of the Health Act, you must be appointed by the mayor of that city. So these are the kind of things that this EHP goes through. So understand the frustration when he or she enters your premises. This is what I'm trying to say to you all. And then this is the string of legislation, and I've only quoted a few of it. Some of you will know. This last one, this is their Bible, the Criminal Procedures Act. They are peace officers, so when they walk in there, they got the right of arrest, they got the right of confiscation, all of that. That's why I couldn't understand why listeriosis was so badly handled in this country. And I can say that as a critic, because I travel the world in terms of my presidency, and this was very badly handled. If we have all those laws in this country, we should have handled it much more better. And I still am critical of the minister. You can quote me on that. In terms of the scope of practice on food control, this is what the person has to do. This is what an EHP has to do. Look at the string of things that he or she has to do in terms of food control in this country. That is what's set down in legislation. This is what's set down in legislation, including international legislation when it comes to Codex Alimentarius. So these are the things you need to understand in the food industry, why an EHP actually exists in this country. Can that person do all of this work plus the rest of the work I gave you in the beginning in terms of the scope? So it's quite a challenging task for this individual. And then in terms of definition, why I gave this definition very, very clearly in transformation. We are talking today about culture, behavior. We are trained as EHPs to look at these things when we go into premises. But how many of the EHPs actually practice the culture and behavior change when you enter a premise? Do you understand? We're now talking to big industry. There's a very big industry out there called the informal trade, which is so, so important to us because we all point fingers when there's a problem, because they are the biggest buyers from the big distributors in our country. And if we can't understand this culture change and behavior change of that industry, then we've got serious problems in this country. We have not addressed it. And that is why I say that we need to do exactly what is happening in the US, in New Zealand at the moment. I just come back from New Zealand, where I was inaugurated as a president. And you must look at their food industry. Everything when you enter a food industry is similar like to the FDA charts. What they do there in terms of the industry is they put this chart at the entrance, listing all the diseases that is possible in that industry and what are the reactions of workers plus the community out there. Vomiting, fever, headaches, shivering. And one of the interesting things for me in this list was the listeria one. And it said very clearly, 9 to 48 hours for gastric intestinal symptoms, 2 to 6 weeks for invasive diseases. And where is it found? Unpasteurized milk, soft cheese makes with unpasteurized milk, and ready-to-eat deli meats. Why were we looking so long in this country to find where it was? We got such great experts here. Because you left out the environmental health practitioner, the most important person, you left them out. When I say you left them out, they broke every rule in the book because I gave you all the legislation. Who should have been doing that inspection? Who should be carrying out? Who has the right to enter your premises in terms of this legislation? It is the environmental health practitioner. So I'm saying we handled it, it's controlled. I'm very happy that we didn't lose many more lives, but we lost lives. And this fight is not over because listeria needs to be dealt with properly. We asked, how can the industry help in this process? And this is the culture change. It's not you and us. It's us all together in this fight. And that change can only come in terms of culture, Linda. And I keep saying this. Our culture and behaviors can only happen if we work together. the Ministry of Health, the industry out there, all the organizations that serve in this food industry should be working together. When we write legislation, we should be sitting around from the very beginning with the legal people from government sitting with us, not to bring out the legislation and say, comment, I'll read your comments and I never make any changes. Because we need to work together if you want it to be implemented. Otherwise, it will never happen. So we need to have that mindset. That mindset change. And that's why they say it should be something in your DNA. That's what they talk about in behavioral change. It must be in your DNA. It must be on the DNA of every single person in that company. So I think that is one of the points that we want to make. We talk about transformation. Why do we want to make the changes? And I've been giving you some of the issues. And you'll see there's regulatory requirements. There's lack of training at the moment. Both the EHP and the industry out there, I'm saying we have a lack of training. The demand for consumer expectations. Consumers have a demand out there. We are turning out our goods because we want to make sure that we can meet the demands for profit. The competitive market that is there at the moment. The business owner's expectations. If you don't provide and make profits for your business principles, you've got problems because your targets have to be met. The lack of equipment, leadership. This leadership that you talk about is very, very important. I know a lot of speakers today spoke about leadership. But the leadership that you're looking for is people that must know what's happening from the bottom of the industry right to the top. In other words, you should be walking the talk. You should be there on the floor, on the shop floor, to know what it is like in terms of issues when they come about. And I was very happy from RCL in terms of the way you handled issues. You should not be persuaded to make a decision because some company thinks, at leadership, one person thinks there's going to be loss of profit. Then there's a problem. There's a serious problem. Because you should be independent when you have the final say in the quality of food in your enterprise. And then staff working conditions, this is another serious issue. We walked into a premises here in the city of Johannesburg about a month ago where people were pulling a 14-hour shift in a food industry. Small food industry, not very big, but a 14-hour shift. What can you expect of those employees in that enterprise? So these are realities that are happening. And this one here in terms of lack of communication. Instructions come by a memo. By certain date, we expect this set of guidelines to be implemented. Nobody asked the person who's implementing those guidelines, is this possible on the shop floor? Can you make sure that we can do this on the factory floor? Is it going to be any result that's going to improve the conditions that we work under? Or are we going to get better clientele and better satisfied customers out there? No, we want to make sure that the production happens because this is what we believe should be the culture in the enterprise. Now that is a wrong approach. And that's what this is about. We should be communicating and getting input in terms of the changes that we actually make. And this is very, very important if we want to see teamwork. The 11 steps to creating food safety. Now we took this out and we're acknowledging Francine Elshaw there, who is of the Food Safety Training Solution Incorporated. We use this in New Zealand, the start at the top. In other words, from your management to your board of directors to anybody who's involved in the food chain at the top, they need to be involved in such a way that if they say that this is the right way we need to approach things, then we should be actually making sure that they themselves demonstrate this. Not to say when profits are being involved, then we need to change those rules. Because that culture must come from the top to the bottom. The second issue, they need to explain why to the employees. If we are making this kind of changes in our food industry, then they need to explain why. And there should be some rationale behind that kind of change. And everybody should be thinking the same way out there. Providing ongoing food safety training for all staff, including senior management, the training should be done. In fact, it should be in a joint group, not separated for general workers out there on the shop floor or for your managers or supervisors separately. It should be a joint training session. There isn't a grade in terms of training session or an hierarchy. It all should be the same. Provide proper equipment many times. And now at the moment, your food industry is having challenges in getting the kind of thermometers in terms of R638, you know? But who thought about that? Before you made that decision, didn't you see that the people should be manufacturing these things in our country and making it available? You've got to have thought processes before you make legislative changes. Training every food industry in the country and making sure that every one of them comply is something I'm going to see after this court case, what is going to happen in terms of that requirement. Keeping temperature logs, we need to make sure that we must ensure that our employees keep temperature logs. When food arrives, it shouldn't be thawed. They must have training in such a way that they will not accept food that is thawing and is not of the required temperature, and it should be returned. Even if it's taken out in such a way and when they're preparing the food and the temperatures are not, they should be properly logged. So there could be a trail of paperwork in terms of this, and you can go back and find out where the things went wrong. Inspection of food to make sure it's safe upon arrival. This is something they must be empowered to make that decision. When it arrives at a place, they must make sure that it is safe upon arrival. Stay informed and be aware. They must be trained in such a way that they are aware of what food safety is about, what wholesome food is about, and how they should react when they get this kind of food delivered to their enterprises. Conducting self-inspections. I think this is where we want to pause, Linda, because that is where we are appealing to all of you. The responsibility of food safety is all of ours, especially the manufacturers. You need to have some sort of food safety auditing and control on your premises with a proper record of all of those issues and results that you have done. Yes, the laboratory facilities are not at the best at the moment in this country, but maybe we are getting there. And we need to make sure that we log every one of those inspections. So when you have to deal with the issues, when an external auditor, where you get experts to come in, then they would be able to ascertain where you can make improvements and make changes. So I think that is what is important. I don't think the law should be punitive. It should be actually to make sure that you can improve. That's what it should be about. Improving our culture and behavior in the food industry. And that's where I said in the end, we need a third-party expert to actually follow on that. The allergens is when you're preparing foods, don't make sure that you cross-contaminate these foods with the foods that you're preparing for people with allergies. And avoid careless mistakes. Now these are just things of culture and behavior. That's what it's all about. This is what we want to recommend in terms of some of the issues. The self-inspection audits and self-regulating. It is a critical issue. And I think if all food enterprises could look at this, it will be something that will be very important. And maybe we must have a format in which this thing could then be reported, possibly through a central body, so at least we can guide the process. And I think this is where some of you come into play here. The retraining of employees and also environmental health practitioners. I don't know whether, Prof, our training for the 4-year degree is going to cover so much on culture and behavior, but they do culture. It's very, 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 very flimsy in terms of the way that module is written. But I think it is critical that even when EHPs are trained, they need to look at the way we're changing in the food industry. So I think that is very, very important. The joint understanding of legislation, regulations, and policies. And I think that is also very, very critical. We must have an understanding, not for us to fight after the regulation is passed and approved. Strong leadership on food safety culture. I think every speaker today has spoken about this. And I think it mustn't be something that we just speak about. It's something that we can demonstrate works in an industry. We must actually demonstrate our leadership qualities in terms of the industry. And you know what is the biggest joke, even with government? We have norms and standards and we have a score sheet. As long as I met my KPIs, I got my bonus for the year in terms of my scoring, then I'm happy. But the customer out there is not happy. And you as the food industry are not happy because you are going to get harassed then by the poor environmental practitioner will come there and tell you this is what has to be done. Because he also has to do a score sheet. So that is a long chain of people trying to meet KPIs. And it should not be about KPIs. It should be about real work. The use of food safety experts, I think this in big industry, it is very, very important that this happens. Proper communication by all, I think I covered part of that in the earlier stage. Access to laboratory facilities. I think our laboratories, especially the state laboratories, should become more open and more time-wise. It takes a long time before they give you results. And that kind of delays creates more problems. And I think if we could have been a little bit more faster in terms of listeria, we would have been able to save some lives. We didn't. And I think that's a serious issue that we've got to look at. And re-look at EHP training. And I say this again, Prof. I think we must make this recommendation when we're looking at training of environmental health practitioners. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And I will be here till 2:30, so if you need any questions. Thanks.